So, welcome to episode 75. Yeah, I know. We're 3/4 of a century old. I'm Katie.
I'm Garrett. This is like last night when we were talking about the years that we were born, but instead of saying the year, we were saying, I'm 90. I'm 87.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Quarter of a century.
for our regular listeners, quick housekeeping update. For the time being, for the foreseeable future, for now, our Patreon, all of our Patreon subscribers are going to continue to get ad-free episodes. We are also just going to have one tier on Patreon, which means that everyone will be an anklet tier. And all of our Patreon subscribers get added to our close friends list on Instagram if that's something you're interested in. Our goal right now is to do one bonus episode a month. But because we're doing ad-free episodes, you may not get the bonus episodes quite yet. We're working on it. We're doing our best.
We're trying so hard. It's
But
so hard.
also, Patreon subscribers are getting video episodes, which is a big update. So if that if that takes off, if you guys really like that, then we perhaps will consider expanding that to being like a public benefit to our YouTube channel. But for now, it is Patreon exclusive. So if you like any of those benefits, if you're interested in any of those, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarsankle-high for just $5 a month. And as a quick reminder, as soon as we get 100 Patreons, I get those cool fucking boots. And
you shared them to the story, right? So that people could
I sure
see.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like if Cowgirl Barbie came to life in a Jessica Simpson boot. It's just their hot pink rhinestone fringe. Oh, so good. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
They would look very cool, like, walking.
Yes.
I think, though, you would also have to learn how to line dance. I think that would be another requirement.
That's totally fine.
I'm
It's
also
line dancing is
realizing-
just slow Irish dancing, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's true.
And I
Also
did the electric
realizing-
slide in gym class, so
We did. Oh, we learned Cotton Eye Joe. I feel like I could probably line dance. I still
Yeah.
remember it.
I feel like that's like a 10-minute YouTube video and I got it down.
I busted that out and my spouse was like, "What the fuck is happening right now?" I was like, "You don't know the Cotton Eye Joe dance?" And he was like, "No."
I don't know the Cotton Eye Joe dance.
You
but I do
shouldn't
know the
know
electric
the Cotton Eye
slide.
Joe. In my head, you said the electric slide. So we've talked about this before, like our issues with songs, and actually we have a great example of that. So I'm gonna tell you mine, and then we're gonna talk about Katie's from last night. We have friends that we play Mario Kart with remotely. So we'll set up a video chat, we'll sit into a video chat, and we'll play Mario Kart and like chat and catch up and whatever, laugh. And sometimes on Mario Kart you can like drive on the wall.
Yeah.
You can like go up onto a thing and drive sideways. So one night when we were doing this, I was driving on the wall and I started singing Driving on the Wall, like Blinded by the Light. And it's become, now we just will say, hey, do you guys want to drive on the wall? And then all of us are like in our head are like, driving on the wall. And my spouse was like, I cannot believe you made a song to Blinded by the Light. I was like, yeah, it was
What's
perfect.
the problem? Yeah.
It was absolutely perfect. Katie's example is last night. How did James Taylor come up?
I don't know. I think your spouse brought him up.
James Taylor. Yeah, I don't even remember how James Taylor came up.
But he came up and
Kiki said, "Who's that?"
And I said, "That's the one that goes, ow, hit me."
Yeah, you said he's white? It must have been like, oh, so white he likes James Taylor. We were talking about something.
Yes,
it was like,
it was something like that.
How white is it? So white it likes James Taylor.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And Katie goes, I didn't think James Taylor was white. And I
Which it was,
was
like,
like,
literally,
"Timeout,
like, record
record
scratch.
scratch."
Yeah.
For both of you. I was like, "What the fuck at both of you?" And Peaky was like, "Hey, what do you mean me?" I'm like, "You, because you said you don't know who James Taylor is." And Katie, "Who are you thinking of?" And then when you did the impression, we were like, "So that's James Brown." And I think we
It's
should
not
do
my fault they have the same name.
um, truly couldn't be more different people.
I still wouldn't know what I couldn't pick James Taylor's face or James Brown's face out of a lineup right now still. So,
Wild.
mm.
So, I think that we should do a Patreon game like we did Gene Hackman or Hugh Jackman. We should do a James Taylor or James Brown
Mm.
with a list of song titles and try and guess which one's which. So I will work on that.
Okay.
I will come up with a game.
Oh, also, I didn't mention it, but also our Patreoners are getting extended intros to our episodes, with more, like, personal life update stuff. So if you want more
Yeah.
info on us, you have to
It's
go to
usually the
Patreon.
stuff that our editor is like, "I'm cutting this out because who gives a fuck?" We're just
Yes.
gonna leave more of that in for Patreon. So I think you're welcome.
Mm.
Not really sure. Maybe not. Maybe I'm sorry. Don't know.
I'm never sorry. I mean, I'm
I
occasionally sorry, but not usually. Not for this.
no. Um, and I'm realizing that when people get video episodes, they're gonna see all the stimming that happens while we record,
Yep.
as I'm compulsively playing with this hair tie I've been playing with the entire time we've been recording.
And I'm constantly looking elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Anyway,
actually playing with a different hair tie when we were recording on Friday, now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway,
that's
what are we
fun.
talking about today, Katie?
Well, I was gonna do an episode on capsule wardrobes for ADHDers, and
Oh, fucking
then
love
I was
capsules.
like, I like looked that up, and I was like, okay, that's information. And then I was going to look up and do an episode on like ADHD and learning disability screenings for youthful offenders and in juvenile court systems and
I feel like
like
that's a more time consuming.
yeah, I did a CLE on it last year for my to maintain my law license, and I want to re-listen to that and like put more into it. So I was like, and it was just kind of that thing where I was like, I'm not really in the mood for that.
Yeah.
But this topic had kind of been on my radar for, I mean, probably about a year at this point. I think someone mentioned it to us on our Instagram, either like in a DM or a comment on something. And I was like, I had never heard of it before. And um, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, whatever. And so it's kind of just been like rolling around in my brain. And I mentioned it, I had therapy last week, and I mentioned it to my therapist because I had told her that we had done that episode on microdosing. And I was like, uh, it was just really interesting and blah, blah, blah. And so I was telling her about it, and I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this topic. And she like went on a rant about it. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But she was like, if you want opinions on that, I've got them, blah, blah, blah. Like she was
I love it when somebody has like I have so many feelings on that. It makes me so excited.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, I'll look into that. So I started looking into that and it wasn't like a prohibitively dense topic to research in time for today's episode. So
Oh, that's good.
I'm talking about oppositional defiant disorder.
That
Have you
makes
ever heard
more
of it?
sense. I have, but when I saw the name of the room today that you create, I was like, odd versus ADHD. I mean, yeah, that's like my whole life in a nutshell. Is she just it's like, maybe she's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline.
Yes,
Um, maybe she's odd, maybe it's ADHD.
exactly.
So that's what I thought. That's what I was thinking of. So no, oppositional defiant disorder makes more sense. But no,
It
I don't know
would
a lot about it,
okay.
but I have heard of it.
Okay,
I have like a very like explain to me like I'm 5 understanding.
perfect. So, oppositional defiant disorder or ODD is a behavior disorder diagnosed in childhood in children who are uncooperative, defiant, and hostile towards peers, parents, teachers, and other authority figures. But
I might have that as an adult. Oh, no.
so the key factor is that this behavior must occur more frequently than in individuals of a comparable age and developmental level. Um, so unlike ADHD, which we know ADHD is a neurobiological condition, it lives in your brain and it is what it is.
Mhm.
Um, there's no organic cause of ODD. So the cause itself is officially unknown, but there's two theories of what causes it. There's the developmental theory, which is that problems start when kids are toddlers and have trouble learning to become independent from a parent or other main person to whom they're emotionally attached. Or the learning theory, which is that the behavior is the result of mirroring negative reinforcement methods used by parents and others in power. The idea being that the ODD behaviors elicit a reaction from their caregivers, resulting in attention and the reaction from their parents. And therefore, it like perpetuates the negative behavior that's getting the reaction.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So, a diagnosis of ODD is considered only if, according to one article I read, the ODD behavior disturbance causes clinically significant impairment in social, academic, or occupational functioning. The defiant behaviors do not occur exclusively in the course of a neurotic or delirious episode because of a mood disorder like bipolar. And the criteria are not met for conduct disorder. And if the individual is 18 years of age or older, the criteria is not met for antisocial personality disorder. So, one article I
Whoa.
read, yeah. Um, so that was it was the kind of thing where I was like, this is like a very serious diagnosis. Potentially if this is like if
If
it,
they're eliminating these other major things when they're
correct,
diagnosing it,
like, "Oh,
yeah.
you're not quite antisocial personality disorder, we'll call you ODD." And it's like, well, antisocial personality disorder is like Ted Bundy.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
and also, if you're looking also like a bipolar disorder, it's, okay, are we treating this behaviorally or medicinally? Because if somebody has bipolar, we're really looking at, like, okay, we need to start with what kind of medication is gonna help stabilize them. So,
correct.
it
And
also is
there's
kind of scary
nothing
because how is it gonna be misdiagnosed?
exactly. And from what I could see, there's nothing about like ADHD we know is a brain chemistry issue. Bipolar is a brain chemistry issue. Like these are things that and even if I might be talking about my ass here, but my understanding, like when they do brain scans of people with antisocial personality disorder, it's like the structures in your brain are completely different. So
Yeah,
there's
almost
like a
like an Alzheimer's type thing where
right. So there's like
yeah,
a an organic or physically observable difference in
right,
the brain of the
right.
person with those conditions.
Like, your brain
Whereas
responds completely differently to things versus a neurotypical brain.
correct.
Yeah.
Whereas with ODD, the it's seeming more like it's almost like, "Well, we don't know what's wrong with you, so we're gonna call you ODD."
Well, and I mean, they're attributing the 2 main causes to, like, child rearing basically and how the parenting is, and, like, right now there's a big push, um, with parenting trends because obviously they change over time. Um, there's a big focus on gentle parenting and emotional regulation,
Mhm.
where you're not feeding a bad behavior with a big reaction,
Right,
which is then gonna feed this type of behavior because you are gonna have kids that I think a lot of people play it up to a child being manipulative, and
right.
I think manipulative implies, like, there's a little bit more motivation behind it. I think kids are like, "I want attention from my mom," or "I want attention from my dad," or grandma, or whoever, um, and I'm gonna do something to get that. So whether it's being really good or being beastly because they want that connection, little I just don't think, especially little kids, I just don't think they have, like, I think it's a little bit more like, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Primitive than
Yeah.
being manipulative per se. But
Yeah,
that's the big, like, parenting thing right now is, you respond gently and you redirect instead of meeting
right.
aggression or meeting anger or, like, meeting a kid where they're at that way,
Correct.
and matching that, you're only gonna feed that bad behavior, which turns out causes a diagnosable behavioral issue.
Yeah, well, and for me, the manipulation thing, that accusation of a child, I find so problematic in and of itself because I think,
Mhm,
for me as an adult person to try to manipulate somebody else, like, I'm doing it in order to get a very specific result.
mhm,
It's not a, "I want you to be nice to me, so I'm being a people pleaser." It's like, I'm treating you a certain way so that I get XYZ. I get a, whatever. I don't know. I
right.
don't think that way, so I can't, like,
Same,
come
like,
up with a hypothetical.
and I think
But
too, like, I think sometimes I just feel like manipulation itself is it's such a loaded term, and I think, if I'm communicating with you in a way that I know is the most effective for you, it's not me manipulating you, it's me communicating with you in a way that I know is effective for you.
right.
And, little kids and babies, like, I've even had somebody make a comment, the baby was crying and wanted to be picked up, and it's crazy how early they become manipulative. She's not being manipulative, she just wants to be held. She wants her mom to hold her. Who doesn't want their
Right.
mom to hold them? Like,
Right.
so no,
Well, that's just
it's
it.
yeah,
It's not like, I'm 36, I still get hugs from my mom.
and
Like,
it makes me sad when I think about, like, viewing a baby that way.
mhm.
Like, somebody viewing a baby in a way like, "That manipulative little bitch." Nope, she's just she just actually and funny, when it came up, the baby had COVID. The baby really didn't feel good.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it just makes me really sad when you see adults applying adult behaviors to the way kids are acting out,
Mhm.
which I think is just so much more it is so much more primitive with little kids. Like, it's not these, adults, "Oh, I had X, Y, and Z happen, 30 years ago, and I haven't dealt with it, and I'm still caught in this loop of reacting to things this way." Like, usually
It
kids are just being
Yeah,
kids.
it's just that thing where it's like, I'm 3 or I'm 5, and I've never had this kind of feeling before. I've never had this interaction where
Mhm,
I'm in a classroom and, um, I'm forced to share. Like, if I'm an
mhm,
only child, I may not be used to sharing or used to, like, taking turns or waiting in line or
mhm.
any number of things where, like, you just haven't done it before, so your reaction to that might be extreme, it might seem extreme. So there is a clinical difference in the sense that it has to cause a significant impairment in that social, academic, or occupational functioning.
Mhm,
So it kind of like with ADHD in the sense that, like, yeah, everybody, struggles with focus sometimes and everybody struggles with sleep sometimes and executive functioning and blah 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 blah. But when it disrupts your life is when it's a diagnosable condition. But one article I read said that about 40% of children with ADHD also have ODD, which I wasn't able to discern whether it's just like, first of all, what
chicken
order
egg,
those diagnoses came in,
right,
but also, is it just that these kids with ODD are living in a household that's maybe a little bit dysfunctional?
mhm,
So the symptoms of
or
ODD.
not geared around ADHD, so it
Right.
just, like, amplifies any issues that they're having that much more.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me about when I was doing this research is that they talk about, like, the problem starting when the child is a toddler. So, like, you've got a 3-year-old who
I feel like your
doesn't wanna
whole life as a
listen.
toddler is occupational defiant.
Well,
It's not
that's just it.
occupational.
Like,
What is it?
that's oppositional defiant.
There we go. It's not occupational.
"I don't wanna work and you can't make me."
Me.
The children yearn for the mines.
me to me. Um, yeah, like, I that's a toddler's whole life
Well, that's just it. So it was that's the kind of thing where I was like,
while they're trying to,
"What the
like,
fuck are you
establish
diagnosing, like, somebody
autonomy.
in diapers with? Like, cool it." But whatever.
I
So the
mean, I had
symptoms.
wait a minute, this is totally unrelated, and I'm so sorry to derail. I had a lady in BJ's make conversation with me because when you leave the house with a baby, everybody fucking talks to you. And this lady tells me she has an adult son who is severely autistic and or he's whatever, he's got really bad autism. And she started saying how she goes, "Me and my husband are big into vaccines," which to me means you have all the vaccines.
Yeah, but
She
a weird
meant
thing to announce.
right. As I'm standing next to you in line with my baby who is too young for a lot of vaccines still.
Right.
Um, and then she starts saying how, all of his symptoms started after right after he got vaccinated. So that's me, and I'm standing in line, like, sighing, and I was like, "Yeah, I mean, it's also at a developmental stage where just a lot of things are happening at once." So, sometimes I think it's hard to
You should have said, "Have you considered that you should have been, gestating your baby for an additional 12 weeks, and so maybe it's your fault?"
I didn't say that to her.
Hmm.
I also heard
Next
this
time.
lady's whole ass life story in the 7 minutes we were in line together. So when my spouse leaves the house with the baby, I go, "So how many people talk to you?" And he was like, "None." I was like, "I'm not walking around smiling at people. I'm walking around frowning like I normally do." Doesn't matter. Apparently, when men leave the house, they don't get bombarded. So anyway, I'm sorry. So the
Mm.
symptoms of
Yes.
occupational defiant disorder.
Yes. Ugh. So the symptoms of fuck, now I can't think of it. Oppositional defiant
Land strips.
disorder, you asshole.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
frequent temper tantrums, arguing a lot with adults, refusing to do what an adult asks of them, always questioning rules and refusing to follow rules, doing things to annoy or upset others, including adults, blaming others for their own misbehavior or mistakes, being easily annoyed with others, having an angry attitude, speaking harshly or unkindly, and seeking revenge or being vindictive. Now, this list is from johnshopkins.org.
I think I
And
have occupational defiant disorder.
but I read this and I was like, having an angry attitude? Like, what in the parochial school bullshit is this?
Yes.
Like, "Oh, I don't like your attitude." Like,
Yeah.
well, you're about to like it a lot less because guess what? Now I'm real mad.
I just want my pink fucking suitcase. That's what I want, and nobody will give it to me.
I have been explicitly clear.
Was my temper tantrum not clear enough communication about what I'm looking for right now?
But, like, it's
No,
just the
it
kinda
does sound
thing
like
where
very, dated language.
yeah, from
Yeah.
fucking Johns Hopkins, and this is from the DSM. So I'm like, what are we really diagnosing here? Like, you're diagnosing somebody who needs a nap. Like, I don't
Yes. And those
like
are all behaviors that when a child is doing those, my first thought is like, What's going on that's causing
questioning
this?"
rules. If the rule is that you can't run in the parking lot, if you can't give a reason and, like, maybe that's it. Like, if you can't articulate a reason for a rule, then, like, maybe you don't need that rule. But, like, for me, like, we had parking lot rules, and that was where we had to hold my mom's hand in the parking lot because cars back in the '90s didn't have backup cameras, so they
Even
couldn't
with
see
backup
us,
cameras, yeah.
And it's just the kinda thing where, like, no, you're not gonna dart out behind a fucking car that you don't know is backing up because you don't know what it looks like when a car's rear
Right.
backup lights are on. So it's just a whole number of things where I'm like, do you just have kind of like insane rules for kids? And they're like, why do I have to follow that? Like once they start to get a little bit of autonomy, and are
Right,
you
I mean, that questioning of rules is gonna start at, like, 2.5. I mean, it's like as soon as they realize, like, these limitations,
Mhm.
the human nature thing is to push it, question it.
Right.
I mean, it does like, when you read that list, I mean, I'm, like, laughing because I'm like, "Oh, there's half my personality, but it's like at a certain point, are we just listing off personality traits of people? It's like of women that they found difficult
Right,
because
speaking harshly or unkindly, meet me in court. You won't like what I have to say.
or if I haven't had a good night's sleep, guess what? Peaky.
But yeah, so it was just the kind of thing where I was like, it's feeling very like catch-all. Like
Yeah.
you're a quote problem child and we don't know what
Yes.
to do with you, therefore you go over here.
Yes.
Um so also ODD can be classified as mild, moderate, or severe. Mild meaning the symptoms only occur in one setting like at home, school, or working with peers. Moderate means it occurs in two settings and severe means that it occurs in all settings. So, according to Johns Hopkins, although these things happen with all children from time to time, with ODD, these symptoms happen more often and interfere with learning and school adjustment and can sometimes interfere with the child's interpersonal relationships. Risk factors include being assigned male at birth, having a mood or anxiety disorder, having a different conduct disorder, and having ADHD.
Which I mean, so yeah, I mean, it does sound to me like this is a catch-all, armchair opinion,
Yeah.
obviously. A catch-all label for kids that are struggling with something else
Mhm.
and acting out because of something else.
Yes.
And we're adding on this descriptor to their behavior that isn't a standalone thing.
Correct. So, yeah, I got real pissed when I got to treatments. So,
Ketamine.
no, treatments include cognitive behavioral therapy in order to learn to problem solve, communicate, and control your impulses and anger.
Which is probably a good idea anyway, if they have any of these other diagnoses,
Mhm.
is a good idea.
Family therapy to make changes in the family, improve communication, and support the parents and other siblings of the child with ODD. Peer group therapy to develop better social skills. And then medicine. But according to Johns Hopkins, there aren't any medications to treat ODD. But if the child has ADHD or something else, those medications will be used to, like, quote unquote, manage the ODD.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like if you have this coexisting diagnosis that you're being treated for, it's probably gonna be a trickle down, and they're not gonna be acting out or having these same behavioral issues because you're managing these other symptoms.
I guess my thing is like, if this is something that's marked by extreme anger, um, extreme,
And these are so
questioning of
subjective too,
that's just
like
it. So I'm like, especially with the overlap with ADHD. Okay, so we know that we have emotional dysregulation issues, right? And we can fly off the handle and then come down from it. Is it that this person just isn't coming down from the anger? Is that the problem? In which case, like, they do have medications to help manage emotional dysregulation and to manage that type of thing. So the fact that they're like, there's no medication for this, I'm like, are you sure this is a thing then? Because we have medications to treat these things that you're saying are the symptoms of it, and you're not using that to treat this diagnosis. So it's like, why what are we doing here? Like, are we just labeling these kids bad kids?
well, and to me, that's kinda what this screams, like, I mean, a prime example, and I've told this story before, is, like, bumping into my 2nd grade teacher or something as an adult, and she still had, like, shit to say about what type of kid I was, and I was a super sweet kid. I was pretty well behaved. I just had a really bad attention span.
Yeah.
Highly distractible, daydreaming, like, truly a mystery I was not diagnosed as a
Mhm.
child. Um, and obviously things that are completely outside of my control as a 7-year-old.
Right.
Um, and, it was that era when they used, like, kind of like public humiliation almost,
Yes.
like barking at you in front of the other kids and saying in front of the whole classroom that you're slower than molasses in January. Like those are hurtful things to a very sensitive
Mhm.
7-year-old who didn't didn't want I wasn't trying to be bad. I just like
Right.
couldn't fucking control my focus.
Exactly.
I still can't in my 30s. My feral kitten status. So it's I think to that and I'm like, yeah, so if you had that teacher assessing me, she's probably going to say that I'm a problem. But
Right.
I had teachers at different points that thought I was like the greatest
Mhm.
because, they either found a way to engage me or, like it was working, whatever it was. Maybe I had the class at the right time of day and my focus was better, which made everything else better.
Right.
Or, it was right after lunch or we had a break during the class and had a snack or like whatever it was.
Right.
Um, or, it was first thing in the morning or whatever. I mean, there's just like a million and one things that with any one of those diagnoses can impact behavior that it's like it just seems those symptoms are so arbitrary that I feel like all it would take is one professional to be like, "This kid's a problem."
Yeah.
And then you've got this label of occupational defiant disorder.
Well, and
And
especially with when you're a child, a lot of these evaluations consider the input of the teachers and the parents.
Right,
And if the parents are
right.
like, they never go down to bed, it's always a fight, we can never get them to shower, blah
They
blah
don't
blah.
wanna listen.
Right, and it could be, like, I think, to say, like, my problem with the way they even phrase, like, family therapy to support the parents and other siblings, it's like, "Oh, we need to make sure that, like, you're doing okay because this one's such a problem." Not
Right.
like, "Hey, let's make sure that, like, your parenting skills
That's what
are
I thought
being
that's where I thought it was
enhanced."
going, was like,
No.
okay, so this is going to therapy to make sure that you're responding to them from a place of emotional regulation, that you're using, like, those gentle parenting techniques so that you're not matching that aggression that they have all the
Right,
time.
which maybe that's a part of family therapy, and that's the part, but
Maybe.
I don't the fact that that wasn't explicitly stated in what I found really irked me because I feel like a lot of this, it reminded me a lot of the Natalia Grace story because it's that granted,
Yes.
now I've only seen season 1, I'm gonna finish season 2 today because we had a
Oh,
snowstorm and I have
good
nothing to do
lord.
today, but
Whew.
it's the kind of thing where I'm like, this child, like, it makes if you're having the shit kicked out of you, if you're being, tortured at home for whatever reason, if your timeout is that you have to stand in the corner for 6 hours while your family has dinner and watches a movie and you can hear everything happen, yeah, you're gonna fucking act out or you're going to wet your pants more than you ought to or whatever. You're gonna have these moments of acting out and having a an anger response or a temper tantrum
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And so it just strikes me as like, to say like this kid is having all these issues. Like, now granted, I don't know if maybe the first step of this is to have a CPS investigation and have them come over and like see what's going on, to do an interview with the kid and say like, is everything okay at home? Like what's going on? Why don't you, but even that is so tenuous because I think especially in the case of, abusing children, the kid knows what it has to do to survive. And
Mhm.
the even asking pointed questions of like, does your mom ever hit you? Does your dad ever hit you? I think they know to lie because they're still going home to that house at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, as far as they know, so it's just one of those things that like and then the amount of overlap with ADHD, I mean, 40% is a huge fucking number. And so it's the kind
Well,
of
I mean,
thing
how
where
many of those are symptoms of ADHD
that's
in
just it.
boys?
So, I found a study from Turkey that was published in 2018. It was pretty small, but it compared children with ODD and ADHD and their behavioral problems, family conflict, and cognitive functions. So it was pretty small. There was only 60 patients, and they were selected and sorted in accordance with the DSM-4 criteria. Um, the DSM-5 is the current manual that's being used, but this was DSM-4. So, the study found no significant differences in performance in this Wechsler intelligence scale for children's tests and the subtests for that. No significant differences in performance in verbal scores of that main test for the Wechsler test. No significant difference in the child behavioral checklist, which was filled out by each child's parent, and no difference in the marital conflict scores and conflict expansion scores when the researchers evaluated the children's home environments. There was only a difference in the Bender visual, it's like the Bender Gestalt test. It's a test that measures visual motor perception. And so you have 9 cards with geometric designs on them, and you show them to the candidate, and they have to try to replicate it. And before the next card is shown. And so it's kind of like just like object permanence, your ability to replicate what you're seeing. And then I guess there's a portion of the test where you would have to put those images in order again. So it's testing your memory.
Uh-huh.
Um, so there was only a difference in that Bender Gestalt test. And the results of that test are based on the accuracy and organization of the reproductions, where the ODD group outperformed the ADHD group. And the researchers opined that that was because ADHD has a quote, organic basis, whereas ODD has no genetic or organic component. The underlying environmental and family factors are what impact ODD. So, what I'm getting from this is that you've got a 60 ADHD only kids, and some of them are STEM inclined and other ones aren't.
Yeah.
Like, I don't the ones
I'm
for that did this test really well are probably gonna go be graphic designers and, like, will be architects and whatever. But,
right.
like it was
Yeah,
just the kind
I'm
of like, I couldn't believe that they were like, "There's, no difference." And I was like, "So then why are we doing ODD?" Like, ultimately.
But yeah, it's like I'm like now that I'm like really thinking about these symptoms that they're talking about and they're like, "Oh, well, I mean, it's like kind of like a mix of like parenting, but it's also like caused by, all of these other diagnoses that they have because, there's all this overlap." Like it does fully sound like they're I'm not like a conspiracy theory person, but it almost gets to the point where you're like, are you just trying to find a way to like add another diagnosis onto
Mhm.
this to, like, info dump on somebody, like, "Well, they've got this, and they've got this, and they've got this, and they've got
Right.
this,"
Like, are
and
you doing the Dee Dee Blanchard bullshit?
Mhm,
Like, yeah.
right, and adding diagnoses onto these kids who I mean, I just think, like, as someone who was I mean, we were undiagnosed for so long,
Yeah.
and we're struggling with I mean, like, we talked about that in our very early episodes where I was like, "Wow, there's so many, like, things about myself that I struggled with for so long, and I just, like, couldn't put my finger on it."
Yeah.
Like, why am I feeling things so much more intensely than other people? And why is my reaction to things so much more intense than other people? And the emotional dysregulation and just like all of these things that I was like, oh, I get it now. You
Yeah.
know, to then grow up, the converse of that is then to grow up with these diagnoses where you're like, I have oppositional defiance disorder and I mean, like, I just feel like at a certain point, these diagnoses are following these kids.
Yeah.
So, at what point as an adult can you shake that? And,
Right.
okay, well, yeah, my ADHD was not managed at the time. And now that I'm older and I have more tools and I found the right medication and I'm in therapy, whatever combination is working for you at that time. Um, I just feel like we're at a certain point, like, are we just saddling these kids with things that they're going to have to be like kind of fighting against their whole life?
Oh, absolutely. And what really struck me, you just reminded me of it too, because we've talked a lot about the overlap with ADHD and autism,
Mhm.
but one of the ones that always resonates with me is like that not questioning authority, but like, I need you to explain to me why we're doing it this way.
Yes.
What's the reason? And it's not because I'm challenging you. I just want to understand what your goal is so that I know, like, if I can find a different way to do it, that works better for me and still gets you to your same
Right.
goal, then I'm gonna do it my way because that's what works for me. If
Or
it's
I can't
n
pattern it. If it
Exactly.
can't fit into my head, if I can't put this puzzle together, I'm
Yes.
not gonna be able to pattern it and learn it because I can't get it to fit in to what I have in my head.
Right, and it's not me trying to make your life more difficult, it's
Right.
not me trying to, like, question authority or blame you for my mistakes, but it is me trying to understand, and if I try to ask that question and you come at me with, "Why are you asking that question? I told you to do it this way." Well, no, then I will meet you at your level because
Yeah.
congratulations, now you've awoken my emotional dysregulation,
It's when you
and
have a
I
dog
will
and you try and pull them and they slide out of their collar. That's what's gonna happen.
Mhm.
I'm gonna
Oh, for
"Mhm."
sure.
Just gonna
And
back
it's
up and slide right
like
out.
you wanna come at me when I'm asking a totally rational question,
Right.
and you come at me and tell me to, like, shut up and just do it. Fuck you. I will dig my heels in and not do it even harder now.
Well, and
So, like
also, I mean, to make it more of a behavioral thing, if you're just giving me this top down, "This is what you need to do," and you can't explain to me
or you refuse
why
to explain.
right.
Like that
Is it
like, hiding
because
information for no
right.
reason.
Is it because it really is a stupid thing? Is it an arbitrary thing you're doing to keep me busy? Because no. Now I do have occupational defiant disorder, but it's like,
Specifically at work, you can go fuck yourself.
yes. And, you also don't want to like, with these subjective, descriptions of symptoms, you also don't wanna have kids that are drones. Like,
Right.
you want your kid to be a critical thinker, you want them to seek understanding and seek clarification, and you don't want a kid that just follows what an adult says.
Yeah.
How many generations of kids did we have like that wound up victimized by people or,
Or in QAnon.
in QAnon? Like, there's truly, like, a lot of fallout from that affects the way people live their lives. So, if I have to deal with a really challenging, strong-willed, difficult kid for a few years versus having a kid that blindly follows what an adult tells them, the kid who is strong-willed and difficult is gonna keep themselves safe from a lot of things throughout their life.
Mhm.
Like, a certain level of suspicion, it's like an instinctual thing to keep you safe. You're suspicious of things that may not be safe.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I
Oh,
don't think it's
absolutely.
good to, like, train that out of somebody either.
No, I agree. And I found this Venn diagram from neurodivergent_insights. And they have a thing called Misdiagnosis Monday, ADHD versus ODD.
Sorry.
And for ADHD, the ADHD only side of this Venn diagram, they list the symptoms as difficulty with organization, difficulty regulating attention and focus, craves novelty and new experiences, hyperactivity and impulsivity, and hyperfocus. Agreed.
Mhm.
Uh, for
Fair.
ODD, the ODD only side, it says the symptoms are revenge seeking, blaming others for their own mistakes, disregard for rules, aggression, purposefully annoys others. I don't know. I if you have siblings, that's having siblings. Um, argues
Or
with authority
a
figures.
long-term partner.
Argues with authority figures, demand avoidant, and uncooperative. And then there's like a little asterisk that says occurs more frequently than peers and causes significant problems for the ODD side. And then in the middle, the shared traits are irritability, prone to anger, difficulty regulating emotions, intensified meltdowns or tantrums, tendency to get up from chair, move when it is expected to sit, difficulty following directions, and seeking stimulus. Now, I'm not clear why tendency to get up from chair and move is different than hyperactivity and impulsivity because that to me is an extremely impulsive thing that I do where I just like get up and walk around or do the Jiminy Glick thing and shift in my chair all the time. Because now that's all I can think of, thanks to you.
If anybody has watched any of the Natalia Grace, episodes, her adoptive father, Michael, my spouse and I realized is a real life version of Jiminy Glick. And I guess you would have to be old enough to have watched Comedy Central in the early 2000s when Martin Short had a interview show where he would interview celebrities as this Jiminy Glick character, and it is fucking hysterical. Um, but Jiminy Glick had this thing where he would, like, just, like, perch himself up on top of a chair. He would just, like, climb and contort himself, like, way high up in a chair. So tell me. Um, and it is a very ADHD thing, like,
It is,
I
and that's
notice
just
it the most
like,
before I go to bed where I just, like, I fidget for, like, 20 minutes
oh, I
before
fidget
I
my
I
life away
settle.
at my desk. I have,
That
like, a little
too,
step
yeah.
stool under my desk at work, and I've got one foot up, I've got both feet up, I've got it underneath my knees, I've got it underneath my calves, I got my heels on it, I've got one leg, like, on it like I'm Captain Morgan, like, I am
That time
all
lapse,
Yes.
you know, the one
Yes.
where there's the 2 people working and there's a neurotypical person and an ADHD person, and he's just like
Yes.
constantly moving, fidgeting, picking things up,
Which if you wanna
spinning
see
around
us
in his
fidget,
chair.
join our Patreon because that's what you're gonna see in these video episodes.
I'm still playing with this hair tie, still doing it.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, it's yes.
Right.
But you know what? Also find a little kid that doesn't do that.
But it's also purposefully annoys others is just so bizarre to me. It's such a kid thing to do,
Yes.
like, to be a pest. Like,
Definitely just a
I
kid thing and not an
remember,
adult
like,
thing.
and I know that I've talked about it on the podcast before, but, like, my mom has, like, she would put herself in timeout when we were kids because she needed to get away from us annoying
Yeah.
her. She was like, 10 minutes, mommy's in timeout. You can't talk to mommy." Okay, like, she just needed time
Katie needed a
away from
rule,
us.
and she was like, "Well, that's the rule, we can't talk to her, so
Yeah, no
10
talking to
minutes."
somebody in timeout. And, like, it's that kinda thing. And then, aggression and difficulty regulating emotions and, um, arguing with authority figures and being prone to anger, those are all the same thing. So I just feel like a lot of the ODD quote unquote symptoms are the same things as ADHD. And at a certain point, when the Venn diagram is just eclipsing
Yes.
everything else, if you have a single thing that makes it ODD, why is that even a separate diagnosis at all? Maybe it's just that this person has something else going on.
Yep.
And they very well may. I mean, I know I mentioned it in the beginning of the episode, but, like, my therapist, she was like, "I fucking hate ODD. They put everybody who they just don't know what to do with in that category." And she told me this story about how several years ago she had a client who was diagnosed as ODD, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't know what to do with him, blah 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 blah." And he was not nonverbal, but, like, kind of close. Like, he would just not he would go quiet. So, like, he
Which
and
if
she
you're
was
being
like,
labeled as a bad kid,
correct. And so she was like, she's like, "I knew if I could, like, make eye contact with him, I could, like, connect and he'd be fine. Like, he might be doing something, but I could, like, make that eye contact and maintain, like, a connection with him so that he
mhm,
didn't get hurt." And so at one point, I guess he, like, ran off, and she was calling his name, and he wasn't looking back, he didn't make eye contact, and she thought he was gonna, like, run into traffic. Like, he was
mhm.
running really far, really fast, and she couldn't catch up to him. And so he finally stopped, and she was like, "I was really, like, pissed. Like, I was really scared. I thought he was going to get hit by a car because, like, I guess, like, he stopped right before a car came and, like, almost hit him."
Oh,
So she was like, so she had that, like, "What are you doing? Like, why did you do that? You know that you have to make eye contact with me and, like, let me know what's going on." And he was like, "I was throwing arrows in the sky for you so that you would know where I was going." So she realized that he was hallucinating and having a bipolar manic episode. And that's why it seemed like he wasn't paying attention or he refused to listen, but it's because he was hallucinating and seeing
holy
things.
shit.
And nobody, like, had made the connection, so she finally managed to get ODD removed from his file, but it was like she was like, "I had to fight for that," because and she's like, "We got him, on the right medication, and he didn't have those issues anymore, and he was able to tell when we needed to, like, increase his meds because he was going into another episode or whatever." So, like, she was like, "He was great." Like, and but it's that kinda thing where, like, if you're just going to throw these people who are uncooperative into this ODD category where there's no real treatment beyond CBT, and hopefully your family is compliant with the family therapy thing. If your family isn't willing to, or if you live in America and can't afford it,
Mhm.
um, or that's not covered by your insurance, or maybe it's only covered for 3 sessions and then you're on your
Or
own.
you've got 2 working parents or a single parent who's working a million hours a week and is completely tapped out,
Right.
and can't deal with this whole
Exactly.
different style of parenting they have to learn to try and cope with these behaviors that you
Any
have.
number of things,
Yeah.
but, it just strikes me as, like, you're blaming this diagnosis. It's really the first time that we've, like, researched something where I'm like, "Oh, you are blaming the child for something that they fully cannot control."
Yeah.
Like you are putting all of this on them. Like, "You need to regulate your anger. You need to figure this out. You need to be better at playing with your peers." And it's like, well, if I'm if when I look at you, you have extra eyes and there's a different mouth on the side of your head that's telling me a different story than what you're saying to me, like, I don't know what's going on. And how do I articulate
Right.
that? Because again, like, kids don't have the language for this.
Well,
Like,
and
they don't know what
and
a hallucination is.
a lot of the time, when people will be, complaining about some kind of behavior of a kid, my response to them is normally, "Well, I know adults that don't have emotional regulation. So why are we expecting a 4-year-old to have better emotional regulation than an adult? Or why are we expecting a 4-year-old to be able to articulate, you know, I'm upset for this reason?" I was like, "We have adults that can't do that.
And the other thing that
Lots of adults."
sticks out is, like, this is all, like, and maybe there's more to it that's physical, but these are all, like, verbal. "This child won't listen to me. This child's arguing with me." This isn't this person, this child hits constantly,
Mhm,
that we can't put anybody next to them because he immediately hits them in class. We can't He can't sit next to his siblings in the car because if he can reach their car seat, he'll start hitting them.
mhm.
Or, like, it's not an action. So it's also, like, other than a tendency to get up from your chair when you're supposed to be sitting in your chair, like,
Again, we have adults that don't like sitting in a chair for a long period of time. Why are we expecting a child who is full of fucking energy?
because adults can just have a standing desk. Which, like, let's
Oh!
stop pretending that, like, yeah, sure, standing desk is good for your posture or whatever,
I just
whatever,
have a
and
treadmill underneath my
sitting
desk so
is
that I can run like a hamster all day.
sitting is the new smoking or whatever they wanna call it, but, like, let's call it what it is, and it's stimming. I need to change my position.
Mhm.
I'm standing up because that's what I wanna do right now, because if I sit at this desk for 8 hours a day, I'm gonna blow my brains out.
Yeah.
That's what a standing desk is.
I almost got one
And
of those, like, bicycle seats
oh, yeah?
because, like, I'm stimming. Like, I have to get like, Katie used to sit next to me at work. I would get up. I was usually standing at my desk or constantly going between standing and sitting,
Mhm,
and I would go for a walk at 10 o'clock. I would go for a walk on lunch, I would try and go for a walk in the afternoon, and then I would hit, like, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, "My brain's done.
mhm.
I can't." I would
No, there
try, but
was
I couldn't.
plenty of times I'd, like, turn around to say something to you and you weren't at your desk.
Yes,
Which is probably better because we woulda gotten yelled at for talking anyway, but
because I was constantly, like, refilling water or I mean, it was, like, constantly on the move.
yeah,
Just, like, so busy. Um, Unmedicated,
yes,
very
raw
busy,
dogging,
can't
yeah.
sit still, raw dogging life, and
I mean,
But
I
it
still
and
fidget and I'm medicated. Like, I'm medicated right now, and
yes.
I'm still, like, shifting back and forth. Like, it's
I
not.
I'm it's just so frustrating to me when adults put things on kids that are for
Mhm.
adults. So
Yeah.
you're asking kids to blindly follow things, which adults don't do. You're asking them to, you know, do everything happily, which adults don't do. Um, follow instructions and not question things and not be difficult and just listen to what I'm telling you and all things adults don't do. Emotional regulation and good attention span and sitting still
Yeah.
um it's just wild to me. It's kind of like people what do you want to be when you grow up? And you've
The
got kids that
5-year
are like,
plan thing, and I'm like, "I don't
yeah,
fucking
and
know."
kids are like, I don't fucking know. I still don't know. Like it's such a I or when people have these expectations of kids like excelling in school all the time. And I'm like, right, but as adults, we don't do that.
Right.
Like, there's plenty of times where like, oh, I got a lot going on in my personal life. Like, I just need to like coast for a little bit professionally, or you know, I'm 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 gonna take this like lower paying position that's closer to home
Right.
so that I don't have to worry about, such a long commute or less stress or whatever.
Right.
But we're expecting kids to be like Mensa members and
Yes.
have this loaded schedule and like be doing all these extracurriculars. I just think that there's so much. I think adults, because they, again, like if you're not dealing with your own things, you're then repeating those patterns and you're putting these things on kids. Like, let them be kids. Let them have nothing to do and be bored and play outside and be weird. And, you know,
Yeah.
we have
I
our whole
mean,
fucking lives to sit at desks and be compliant and listening to people or
for
not.
sure. And I empathize with teachers that are struggling with, um, students that are uncooperative and fighting every instruction and, you know, distracting their classmates, and I really do. I don't want this to come across as like teachers are part of the problem, but I do think that, the I think this is one of those examples of when it does fall on a teacher, or when it is put on a teacher to provide an opinion on this. I think it's one of those things of, parents kind of like yeeting the responsibility to the school district,
Mhm.
and then turning around and being like, "Why isn't my kid well behaved?" And it's like, "Well, because we only have them for 7 hours a day, my dude, and, the rest of
And
the
I've
time they're
got
with you."
32 other kids in this class. Like,
Right, and some of them do have ADHD
mhm,
or other things going on, or other things going on at home,
mhm.
and so the reality is that I think, um yeah, I was researching this and I was just like, "You've gotta be fucking kidding me." The fact that this is in the DSM really pissed me off.
Yes. I mean, all of these just scream kids that are acting out because other things are going on.
Absolutely.
All of these
Absolutely.
symptoms. I mean, it's and that's sad. It's sad that we're busier looking for a diagnosis than we are for a solution for these kids. Because if you're telling me there's no real solution, then why are we so quick to put a label on this? Because things come down to data. You're putting a diagnosis code in for this kid.
Mhm.
It's really hard to undo that once you do it.
Yes.
So, if you're creating a situation where this kid's gonna have to fight their insurance company in 15 years because they've got this label in here and it's making it where, they're being flagged for things in the system or they can't get medication they need or um they're having all these additional screenings done for things or whatever. Um
Yeah. Or,
it's
it prevents them from getting a job that they want because they're like, "Oh, you have
right.
a rage disorder."
Right.
Like, "No, I just wanna be, a bailiff, and I think that'd be fun because I've always been interested in court and whatever."
Right.
Like, and now you can't do
And I
that
don't want to sit at
because.
a desk all day
Correct.
with my ADHD. I mean,
Right.
it's I guess it just makes me kind of, like, sad and angry that, um, you're that you have kids that are getting I feel like ultimately this boils down to kids getting labeled as bad kids,
Yes, I
and
agree.
it's not bad kids, it's I just don't I generally, I don't really think there are bad kids. I think that there are things that are happening to these kids, whether it's at home, in their minds, in their bodies, like, whatever it
Especially because they
is.
don't know what fucking causes it.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, maybe, it's like an attachment issue when they're a toddler and they're, like, not doing well with, like, separation and going to pre-K, or maybe it's that their parents are, reinforcing negative behaviors with their reactions." So why is the kid getting labeled if it's because the parents are beating the shit out of them every time they do something wrong, and that's the only way they
Right.
get attention?
Or, because everything's so subjective, you're asking the parents, how are they doing at home? It's kind of like all I can think is, me saying to PK, "This wasn't that bad," talking about, like, newborn, and he was like, "Ma'am, it took you almost 3 years to get pregnant. You
Right.
you were very uncomfortable at the end of your pregnancy. You had to have a C-section, this and this." He's, like, listing things off, and I was like, "Oh, yeah. I guess
Yeah.
you're right." Like,
Yeah, like,
it's
when you put it
so
all together like that.
subjective. Right, like, how many people had a way worse experience than me
Mhm.
and are like, "It was terrible, it was so bad, it was
Which we
so
talked about with our
awful."
PPD episodes, like,
Yes.
when you're sitting there being like, "Well, compared to other people, like, I'm fine, like, my baby came home and wasn't sick and,
Right, like, it
all
wasn't
these
super
so
traumatic
I
and
don't have a reason to complain." And it's like,
right.
"No, you can still fucking complain."
Right. So it's I just think you're taking these things that are so subjective, that are clearly caused by, potentially 1,000 different things, multiple things at the same time, whatever. And you're labeling these kids as defiant.
Yes.
It makes me sad and mad.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It makes
And,
me defiant.
yeah, and that study showing that there was no difference between an ADHD child and an ODD child except
Wild.
for that visual motor test, which, like I said, I mean, I think there's different flavors of ADHD, and I think that ODD is just another flavor of ADHD, perhaps, where people have more difficulty regulating emotions, perhaps.
Mhm.
And that's what marks their ADHD, is that they just really struggle with the emotional regulation. Okay, fine. Maybe you also need an SSRI in addition to
Yeah.
the Concerta or whatever.
Yeah.
And but to say, like, there's no medication to treat it, but we'll try to find something else that can give you medication. It's just like it's lazy. It's lazy.
Yes. It's lazy and it's like we're talking about, if you're going to educators,
Mhm.
when you've got a skeleton crew in a school
Yes.
and overburdened staff and you've got kids with behavioral issues, if I can label them as this and that means they're going to get these additional services and it's going to take these, couple of kids
Yeah.
off my plate, what options are we giving people? So it is
Right.
truly like we're the shithole country and everything's bad because the bars ain't quiet. And I
So
hate being
anyway,
like that, but it really does just like it just makes me really upset because I feel like, you know, adults too often like take away childhood from kids. And I feel like this is just another example of adults kind of whittling down childhood away from kids. You have your whole life to be fucking compliant and boring.
not me.
Let
I refuse.
we we may not have oppositional defiance, but we have occupational defiance disorder. Yeah, it just makes me upset that we have a diagnosis for a kid that doesn't want to listen.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen.
I know. I had to get our meeting back on track a lot of times last night.
Yeah, they're all kitten. I mean, I can't tell you how often my spouse and I, like, we literally have this, "You can't tell me," which is what we'll just say to each other. If one of us, like, asks the other one to do something, the other one will say, "You can't tell me." So, it's literally, like, my whole marriage is built around this phrase.
Now you have a phrase to put to it, I guess.
Yeah, fucking that's wild, that's wild. That got me hyped.
Yeah, no, it's some fresh bullshit, that's for sure.
And I'm not
It's,
and not to, like, discredit and say that these aren't difficult behaviors to be dealing with, because super frustrating, super difficult to deal with, but I think a lot of it really is developmental,
I
and
agree, and the fact that it's just, well, they don't totally qualify for a conduct disorder or for antisocial personality disorder, so we'll call them this, and it's like, but is there something wrong with them then?
yeah,
Because,
it's just so
is
unfair to
it
the
like,
kids.
where are we saying, like, okay, if it's sort of that thing, like, how many people would be able to have access to ADHD services and treatment if it wasn't like, you must have an impairment in your home or work or personal or school life, like, you have to have at least 2 of those things being impacted in a daily basis, and da 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 da, and it's like, but why? Like, why can't it just impact me at work? Because at home, I can get up and change positions, or I can do this, or I'm chronically busy and I just keep busy by cleaning everything. So my house isn't messy, or whatever workarounds I've come up with, so it's
Right.
that kind of thing where it's like, okay, but if so if I meet 75% of the criteria for ADHD, I don't get to have ADHD.
Or
I
we have these, like, dated symptoms.
Yeah,
I mean, when we started researching this, I was like, "Oh, okay, so you're hyperactive and you can't sit still and, you've got bad focus."
yeah.
When I start reading them and I'm like, "Oh, no, me daydreaming constantly as a kid," like, I was not, difficult and super hyperactive and couldn't sit still,
Well, and,
and
like, when we started researching, hyperactive to me is like you're Sonic the Hedgehog, like,
yeah.
speeding around,
You think
not
about the most
I'm
hyper
tapping
kids
my
that you knew,
fingers all the time or clicking a pen constantly
playing with my
or
hair all the time.
playing with my hair. Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean,
Anything.
it's I
Picking at my
remember
skin?
I
Are you
used
kidding
to
me?
paint my nails all the time.
Mhm.
I was constantly changing my nail polish. Sometimes I would go home from school and just change my nail polish for no fucking reason, because it was just,
Yeah.
like, something to do.
Yes.
So it just is, like, I've got a teacher telling me, "Oh, you always march to the beat of your own drum." Yeah, ma'am, I was an undiagnosed kid.
Also, it's a cool fucking drum. Eat shit.
Guess what? It was beaded, okay? It's just, like, she said that to me, and I kinda, like, laughed it off, and, like, as time goes on, like, every time I think about it, it just makes me mad.
It's
I'm like,
fair.
"So you were just labeling me as, like, this difficult kid when I wasn't."
Right.
And that's just, like, a tiny little example of, like, what they're doing with kids that they're labeling with this.
And I think also for, like, ADHD kids in particular, it goes back to that thing, like, if you just tell me why you need me to sit still and focus right now, I'd probably be compliant. It's when you're,
Right.
like, barking orders at me and I don't understand why or what's going on, like, "Oh, you need to take this test so we can make sure that you're learning everything you need to learn." Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Versus, like, sit down and be quiet for the next 15 minutes and fill out the sheet.
Or the
Like,
manipulation thing that we were talking about, like,
yes.
if so it's not me manipulating you, it's me finding the best way to communicate with you. So if you have a kid that can't fucking stand to sit still, but they'll sit on an exercise ball and bounce while they work on something,
Right.
what harm is that causing?
Exactly.
So I just think, like, especially, like, I mean, when I was in school, I was in this, like, very old school Catholic school with teachers that were in their 50s, 60s, and probably older. They just, as a little kid, they seemed like they were a million years old to me. Um,
They were.
and it was
They
like
were eating all that blood and body of Christ, so they were
they
actually
definitely
immortal.
were.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely were. The cabal of Jesus eating teachers.
If you drink enough of that shitty church wine, you actually get pickled, and then you can't die.
Yeah, and then you're just like a
Yeah, you're
cursed pickled
preserved.
kid.
Yeah.
Um And I lost my train of thought. Oh, so I
Sorry.
had I had these, like, very top down, like,
Yes.
sit still and shut up type of teachers, and I didn't respond well to that. Like, I would shut down. I It made me
Mhm.
feel like I was stupid, it made me feel like there was something wrong with me because I
Yeah.
couldn't sit still. So, when you've got that, like, that attitude, which it feels like those teachers are the one who wrote these symptoms,
Yes.
it's not you're not being manipulative by finding the best way to get this kid through the school day.
And even as an adult, I mean, I just had this conversation with my boss because we were talking about the training that I'm going through and how because I have experience in the type of work that I'm being trained to do, the other 4 people I'm training with have no experience in this
Mhm.
practice. And so I said to
Yeah,
my
because you
boss,
have,
I
like,
was
a kind of a niche skill set with that.
right, and so I had said to my supervisor, I was like, "I'm not prone to speaking up because if something is redundant to me, I don't think it's fair for me to dictate that we move on, but at the same time, I'm not sure." I was like, "I also recognize that it's really hard to figure out how to present information when people learn differently." And he, like, nodded and he was like, "That's exactly the problem that we're having because it's a
Yeah,
brand new program, you're a brand new unit, and we just need to figure out the right way to teach this information." And
right.
it was that kind of thing where I was like, "Thank God my boss understands that people learn differently." Like,
Yes.
for me, I know that all of this information for me is going to click as soon as you have me actually in there observing it and then doing it myself.
Mhm.
That's when it'll click for me. I have to, like, be really hands-on and do it. You reciting it to me really doesn't do much for me. I really struggled in law school. Like I've said a billion times, I don't know how I graduated because it's not how I learn. It's
Yes.
not how I learn. I have to do it. You have to give me the case file and tell me to work it up and then come to you with my
Mhm.
conclusions and then say that was correct or that was incorrect. This is where you went wrong. This is where you got distracted by the wrong thing, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's how I learn. Other people that are in my training group may not learn that way, and I don't
Yeah.
know. But I also don't know I'm also the youngest person in this group, so I don't know if those people even know how to articulate, "I have a different learning style."
Which is huge.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I have trained people at work. I've had to train people how to do the same job, and I couldn't deal with the Word documents where everything was just the same font, the same text, everything looked the same. My eyes are
Yeah.
like, fuck every bit of this, I'm not reading it." So, I had to make my own training guide, which is, like, almost geared for people with ADHD. It's, like, bullet points,
Yeah.
there's things in different things are color coordinated so you can follow, there's screenshots, like, you can search things, there's keywords, there's, like,
Is that the thing
reminders,
you did
but
in
it's like
OneNote?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I might have
Um
to pick your brain on that because I was recommending it to my boss for a different thing that we wanna use to, like,
mhm,
track something in particular and to, like, have
yep.
I'll discuss it with you afterwards. But I was like, I know
No,
that there's
it's
a way to make this, like, super functional and shareable amongst people, and
yes.
I think that's how we should
Share
be
it,
doing
like,
it, but I was
people
like, I
can
have to
edit
talk
it,
to Garrett.
plus you can, like,
Yeah.
search keywords. So, like, I remember training somebody who was, like, having a really hard time, and I eventually had to say, "If you don't know where to find this, if you don't know where to begin, search keywords, because it will literally search the whole workbook and tell you where it
Yes.
appears." So, me understanding, like, "Okay, this doesn't work for me, and I know it probably doesn't work for other people, so I'm just gonna find my own way," and it's something that I reference all the time.
Mhm.
So, to recognize as adults who are kind of, like, working obviously on the side and not, like, strictly professionally, but working in this realm where we're
Yeah.
always talking about things that do and don't work for us and, learning styles and, how we retain information, and again, we're expecting kids to be
Right.
able to communicate, "Hey, that doesn't work well for me," when adults can't do it.
No, I didn't learn about different learning styles until, mm,
5 minutes ago.
I'm yeah, like, I mean,
Yeah.
I was already working as an attorney, I think, when I,
Yeah.
like, heard that phrase,
Mhm.
and I was like, "What the fuck is a learning style?" And then, like, Googled it, I think, or somebody was like, "Well,
Mhm.
some people learn by seeing, and some people learn by, doing, and some people learn by reading," and I was like, "Oh, that's me."
Yeah, and
I have a
yeah.
different learning style.
Yes. Like, I found when I started my previous job, I was constantly people were explaining things to me, and I was turning it into a flow chart
Yep.
because I was like, I need this to be I don't need every bit of it written down. I need a guide so I can visually be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, that's what I need to do next,"
Yes.
so that I'm not forgetting about things. And it I mean, how many times was I not successful with something because I couldn't articulate that?
Yeah, which
And then
is
blaming myself.
oh yes, exactly,
I'm
and
just
that's the
not smart
thing
enough to do it.
with this ODD, like, basically having an angry attitude. Like, you should hear the angry attitude to myself when I feel like I fucked something up. Like, when I
Oh,
lose my keys in my own house and can't find them and how
yeah,
mean I am to myself.
yeah,
Talk about an anger dysregulation response. Like,
yeah,
it's so uncalled for. And it's the kind of thing where I'm like, "Okay, thank God, though, I have this diagnosis,
mhm,
because I would have just accepted that I'm, a worthless piece of shit,"
yeah.
and which we've already established. And,
I'm kind of a piece of yeah. No, I mean, the
but,
other day I kept dropping things, and I was, like, furious with myself, and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, maybe you're recovering from COVID, and you're super sleep deprived, and you're trying to take care of another person, and you're 2 shitty dogs, and it's too much, and you're just dropping things because 'cause you're tired."
can you tell that Garrett is struggling with her dogs lately?
I'm having a really hard time. I'm not really both dogs, just one. If anybody wants a 14-year-old dachshund that can't hear anything, has marginal vision, has no teeth, needs to go to a chiropractor, needs to take bladder control pills, and, um,
Requires being held
barks but yeah,
100% of the time.
barks as a form of stimming, let me know. I have one available. Oh god, he's killing me. It needs a diaper.